I don't think they focused too hard on trying to balance it. I think they just let this movie exist and it balanced itself, and that's what made it good. Hey sweetheart, welcome to Nothing But Nuance, the show in which I babble about my opinions and you enable me by being here. So today is actually really out of my comfort zone, but I'm gonna do a movie review on Hell of a Summer. I saw it in theaters this week and I had been waiting for this one for a while. It was originally at TIFF in 2023 and I had been waiting for someone to pick it up and we finally got it in theaters. So I'm gonna be talking to you about that today. However, as you probably know if you've ever seen my Letterboxd, or if you know me personally and you've heard me about a movie, I normally talk about just my first emotion. However, I think a lot of people have been kind of lying in like their Letterboxd reviews and stuff about certain things. So this video is not spoiler free, but I am going to tell you what I liked, what I disliked, and a couple spoilers. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around. I will warn you before spoilers start. Hell of a Summer is a horror comedy in the directorial debut of Billy Bryk and Finn Wolfhard. This movie follows camp counselor Jason Hochberg, who is played by Fred Heckinger, who thinks his biggest problem is feeling out of touch with his teen coworkers. What he doesn't realize is a mass killer has invaded the camp campus and begun to pick off victims one by one. Now, this might be controversial, but even if you don't like the movie, I think you need to view it as impressive. Purely because these directors were 16 and 19 when they started writing this movie. And on top of that, they put 6 years into making this thing. They are currently 22 and 25. They got a film festival release at, God, they would have been what, 20 and 22? That's 20 and 23. And in a world where right now it feels like every single film creator is aging out and then getting replaced with someone almost the same age as them, it is so exciting to see young creatives get a spot. And maybe you could argue that having Finn Wolfhard gave them a leg up, but even then, they've both talked about how difficult getting financiers was, how people didn't want to take them seriously for their age. And it's insane because you finish film school, if you go straight from college, 22. And then you have this degree and they're not going to take you seriously. And I don't think either of them do. I know Wolfhard does not, because one of the articles I used researching this was nofilmschool.com. So him being on there kind of clarifies he does not have a degree. But I'm just putting that point out there. And on top of that, even though it took 6 years for them to make this movie, they only got 19 days to film, and they were doing most of it at night during the summer. So the time crunch these directors were under is so impressive that they were able to do something. Like, I'm genuinely impressed to see someone, I don't want to say my age, yeah. They were younger than me technically when this started, but my age. They made a 70-page script for the beginning, and it turned into something I genuinely enjoyed. And that's coming from someone who does not enjoy comedy movies, and they have said they originally set out to make a teen comedy, and the horror elements came in later. Even then, I think it was very impressive. I do see some of the complaints people have, but I think if you look at just that, you still have to acknowledge how much work two people who were kids when they started put into this project, and that makes it very, very exciting. And I want it to do well because I feel like maybe if they do well, more financial backers and more production companies are going to take those young directors seriously, and we will get more characters who are teenagers and actually feel real and alive, and I think having that young influence really helped there. And I'm really excited about this movie, even though I'm a little lukewarm on it with how I feel. I enjoyed it, but I don't know if it's one I'm going to be rewatching. But it's still really impressive to see. Now, in saying that these young directors had a 70-page script, they have talked about some of their inspos for, like, the tone, for some things they pulled in. Other people have talked about their own opinions on things that got pulled in. So I do want to talk about those and let maybe those inspirations influence if you want to see this, if just the concept from the trailer isn't enough for you. So the directors very heavily talked about using Shaun of the Dead as one of their inspirations, and when you look at the horror comedy element of it and how the comedy is the heavier aspect of it, Shaun of the Dead makes a lot of sense. But on top of that, they've also talked about Bottle Rocket and Superbad, Rushmore, Entourage, even the YouTube video Charlie Bit My Finger, which sounds like such a ridiculous thing to say was an inspiration, but I see it. I do see it. I don't like that I see it, but I completely know what they're talking about. And I don't like that. And it's a positive, I don't like that, but why did they... Charlie Bit My Finger, sure. And then some of the actors have mentioned Freaks and Geeks and Adventureland. I know in one article I read, which I will be linking any article I read in the description so you can go read them as well. Fact check me if you please. They mentioned The Graduate relating to Jason in the sense that Jason kind of has Peter Pan syndrome in a way, and like he's out in the world and he doesn't really know where to go from there. And I think those inspirations are fun. After I saw the movie, my brother who went with me, he turned to me and he goes, that was kind of like Friday the 13th and Scream. Like if you put them together. And while I don't fully agree on that, I see the Scream element, and I get that everyone's relating it to Friday the 13th. You have a main character named Jason in a horror movie where camp counselors are getting killed at a camp. I see that. But hear me out. Sleepaway Camp? I feel like Sleepaway Camp was a little more willing to get silly with it. Kills were a little more out there, and I feel like that relates more to how Hell of a Summer worked. I also, and this is very niche and it may have just been me, if you read or looked at the art from the Total Drama Island, Island of the Slaughtered AU, which is such an odd thing for me to bring up, but if you've seen that and you enjoyed that, I got a vibe from this movie that reminded me of that, and maybe it's just one kill, and if you've seen it and you know both, you know which kill I'm referring to. I don't want to spoil that, but you will know what I'm talking about if you've seen it. But I think that was enough for me to be like, yeah, this was fun. Like, this was a fun time. I like the elements that have been added in there. I find them very enjoyable. But I do think the inspirations definitely shine through in this movie, but they don't make this movie feel like a ripoff of anything. I think there are some points where the inspiration was a little heavier than the others, but I think it's a pretty fun... It's not a brand new concept by any means. We've been killing off counselors at summer camp since 70s and 80s. It's not a new concept, but it was a fun concept, and I like to see it brought back. I feel like, I guess Fear Street did that, but I feel like this was a little different. It was a lot more fun with it. I had a good time. I think the comedy was actually pretty great. Now, before I get too far into what I liked, I'm going to tell you about the characters, because I feel like a lot of my dislikes kind of lean into the characters, and it had more to do with the crew just feeling too big. Okay, so you have your main character, Jason. He's our, like, main counselor. He clearly has Peter Pan syndrome. He was supposed to start an internship for a law career and decided to go back to camp instead. He's very hyper-focused on making sure his, like, teen co-workers like him, that they are having as much fun as he used to. Very much so this, like, kind of... I don't want to call him ditzy, because that's not true. He's very much so, like, he does a good job at what he's doing, but he's very overgrown child about it, and I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, but I will clarify that. And then you have Claire, who's very down to earth. She's also in her 20s, unclear where. She's known Jason for a while. She's very down to earth. She's very much so doing her own thing while still having relationships with the other characters, which I found kind of fun. You have Shannon. Shannon's, like, I think she's supposed to be, like, the cool type. You can tell a lot of the guys are, like, her first scene, one of the other characters is showing her a screenplay. You can tell, like, Finn Wolfhard's character is her love interest. There's a lot of attention around her. But I almost feel like she was almost just a love interest the more I sit on this movie. Which, to be fair, the movie only takes place over, like, I think 16 hours or something. It starts at 9:45 in the morning and it ends before the sun comes up the next day. Like, we're not spending a lot of time with these characters for them to have a lot of personality, so I can't be too mad. I just kind of wish we saw more from certain characters, and Shannon's definitely one of them for me. Then you have Chris, which is Finn Wolfhard's character, which is one of the directors. He's a manic pixie dream boy. People have been calling him a feminist. No, he's annoying about it. He's out here walking through the woods in a robe, holding a thing of cups of water because plastic is a killer. This man's a manic pixie dream boy, and you need to call him what he is. Don't lie to me. And then on the level of talking about the actors, you have Bobby. Bobby is kind of like insecurity personified. He's very obsessed with being seen as hot and like the concept of a camp romance, and he's very insecure in a way that's very realistic, and I think Bobby was very well done. You have Ari. Not a lot to say about him. He's a film bro, he has a peanut allergy, and he's really annoying about it. I saw someone on Letterboxd call him Dark MAGA Timothy Chalamet, and I'll be thinking about that anytime I hear about this movie for the rest of my life, I think, because that was insane. And then you have Mike. Mike is kind of like the hot guy of campus. He's got this one story he tells over and over and over. And then there's his girlfriend, Demi. At least they have some sort of romance going on. I don't remember. I think it says they're dating. I'm almost positive it says they're dating. She's an aspiring influencer, maybe like a micro influencer. Her main focus is like attention in a way. She's very like classic horror woman, if that makes sense. There's a lot of like attention to how she looks. She's fussy about getting her phone taken. Like she is like the teen girl in the horror movie, if that makes sense. A lot of them are teenagers, but she kind of had that vibe more than the other characters did. You have Miley, who is like a vegan, like almost tree hugger type. One of the first scenes we genuinely spend time with her. She's talking about the meat and dairy industry, and that's one of the main things she does. There's something about that is used for comedy later. You just kind of have to watch it. Then you have Ezra. Ezra is a theater nerd. He's a little ridiculous. He's a little fun. If you've seen the trailer, he's the one that I've always wanted to say that. And like I loved Ezra. I found him really fun, really silly. He was a great character to add. And then we have Noelle. I forgot about Noelle. I did. That's one of my main complaints about this movie. Noelle's like a goth. She's a fake psychic. She claims to be clairvoyant. She's the one pulling out the Ouija board in the trailer. I forgot about Noelle. And I mean, I forgot about multiple characters. They were listing the people who were dead. And I turned to my brother and I said, which one is that? Because I didn't recognize one of the names. And so when I look at it, I don't think we had that many characters. I think we just didn't have a lot of time with them to actually care about them and learn who they were before they started dying. I almost wish this movie took place over 2 days so we could sort of have that first day of getting to know them, and then maybe like, oh, the first counselor didn't show up, and hey, it's getting really late and the owners of the camp aren't here yet, that sort of thing. I wish we just had more time with them. I think giving us more time with them would have made it easier to keep up with them, or maybe just taking 1 or 2 out would have made it easier to keep up with them. It just felt like I couldn't keep up with how many characters they were giving me. And that's normally not an issue I have. I normally do like really big casts, so that's just something a little different with this movie for me compared to other ones. That being said, something that has been almost, this is connected, but it's not. Something that's been driving me crazy is everyone saying like 90% of the kills are off screen. That's not true. It's not. There are 8 or 9 kill scenes in this movie, and only 5 of them are on screen. So yes, half of them are off screen, But saying that 90% of the kills in this movie is off-screen just isn't true. We actually got some good ones, and for the most part, we saw either right before or the aftermath for the ones that were off-camera. And I think the aftermath of them almost made up for the fact that they were off-screen, but I do understand the anger there, and I also kind of felt a little disappointed in some of them. There's specifically one we see the whole build-up to the death and then not the death, and that one, I get why. I'm sure the way that character died, the special effects on that were going to be a little different. It would have been a more drawn-out kill, and that would have made it a little more expensive. So I get why his kill isn't on screen, but I wish it had been. This is an R-rated movie. When you go into an R-rated movie in the horror genre, even horror comedies, you expect a little more gore and blood than what you got with this one. And I do understand the disappointment there. I was a little like, oh, a lot of those kills weren't, like, in your face. And that's, not everyone likes in-your-face kills, and maybe that's just a personal thing for me that I prefer them on screen. But I do want to clarify, when people tell you it's 90% of the kills, they're lying to you. It's not. Half the kills are on screen. And then my final complaint with this movie is I feel like there's just a little too much attention to romance. And I get it. I get the concept of, like, the camp romance, the summer romance being something playing into this movie. And I understand that for some of them, it was a driving factor. Like, Bobby is obsessed with the concept of being seen as hot and being the, like, getting his summer romance, and that's fine. Like, I'm not bothered by Bobby. It's just, there's a final kiss scene in this movie, and I'm not gonna say it came out of nowhere, because it didn't. It was, like, built up. We knew it was coming, but it wasn't satisfying. There's very few times where I am not excited for the final kiss scene in a movie, and I feel like this was one of those few times for me that it just wasn't needed. I almost wish that maybe it had been more of a sibling relationship, or they could have just been platonic. I really didn't see the need for that romance storyline. I wish their relationship had been something else. That's just a personal thing, though. I just felt like we didn't need it. And then, again, Shannon and Chris almost felt entirely like their whole personality was this blossoming romance they had going on. And again, story takes place over a day. I can't be too mad about that, but I just wish that, I don't know, I wish we got more of Shannon's personality outside of it being connected to Chris. And I wish we got more of Chris outside of his connection to Shannon. And I think we get more of Chris, and that's probably because he is one of the directors, and so that storyline was going to get built out more, even if subconsciously. But I do wish that Shannon had been a little more than just Chris's love interest. And maybe you think I'm wrong on that. Maybe you think she had more personality I just wasn't seeing. But to me, a lot of her driving factor was Chris, and I'm not saying that's unrealistic. It's just a little disappointing. As for my likes, though, I read off all the characters to you. They are all stereotypes, but none of them feel like caricatures of teenagers. And I do credit that to the fact that the directors were teenagers when they started writing it. They're both still very young. They're still in their career interacting with teenagers a lot because they are also actors. So I like the characters. I just wish that maybe we had a little bit more for some of them. And I've already just ranted for like 5 minutes at you about that, so I'm not gonna go back and keep talking about it. But there is something very comforting about the fact that it's like, none of these characters felt like they were, what's up, fellow kids, about the whole thing, you know? Like, you can tell a lot of them are in their 20s playing the character, and that's often the case. But they didn't feel disconnected from what being a teenager is. And I do really enjoy that. I had a lot of fun with that. And while I do wish we had less characters or more time with them, I do enjoy the way the characters were built up. I'm someone who dislikes comedies. I've already mentioned that. I don't like them. I have never sat down and watched a teen comedy for fun. I'm probably never going to. That being said, I do like horror comedies. I think Y2K was one of my favorite movies that came out last year. I enjoy the concept of having something very lighthearted with deaths, especially if you go a little more gory with them. I think it's a fun juxtaposition. And I liked the comedy in this movie. I think that offering to be, I don't know how to word this without spoiling it. I think the way that one of the characters pleads for his life is the funniest thing in the movie. There are some jokes that are a little flat to me, or they didn't hit my sense of humor, but that's something that's gonna be different on a case-by-case basis. What I find funny, you probably don't. What they find funny, someone else isn't gonna find funny. It's subjective, and even with it being subjective, there was a lot in this movie I enjoyed. So I think it was good comedy. I laughed out loud in the theater, and I don't do that often. That being said, there were also points with the kills where I felt like I was sitting like this, like doing the little emperor, yes, this pleases me, clap, because I think the special effects on the kills we do see were really good. I don't remember, I read who the artist was, I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I think the artist did a phenomenal job, especially with one kill in the, where was that kill? I want to say it was in the Mule Hall, but I don't think that was true. One kill that takes place on a stage. That's how we'll word that. I think the effects on that were beautiful. I got very excited about it. And then finally, I am gonna harp on this more when I start spoilers, but I love the driving factor for the killers. I think maybe it is a little well played now, but especially when they started writing it, a lot of things that had happened in real life hadn't happened yet. And I think their factor of what was driving them forward was very fun. I enjoyed the concept of it. I enjoyed the way they chose to do it, how they flipped it after everyone chose to blame Jason for it, which isn't a spoiler, that's in the trailer. If it's in the trailer, it's fair game. I'm gonna get into spoilers now, especially to talk more about that driving factor. So if that's not something you want, now's a great time to leave. Otherwise, if you're like me and spoilers bring you a little bit of comfort going into a movie, this is definitely a place for you, and let's get into that. Now, back to that driving factor for the killers and their fake death, because 2 of your deaths are not real. I'm not going to fully spoil what deaths were and weren't real because I'm not kill count. This is not that type of video. I am someone who has watched a kill count in the middle of a movie because I was nervous about a character dying. And so if that's the type spoilers you wanted, this isn't the place for you because I do want to leave some stuff to the imagination. I don't want to hurt too many things about this movie. But 2 of your kills are fake kills and they are the killers. And I love the fact that they are killing to get famous because, which might be a trigger for you, I don't know. That's happened a couple times recently, especially in the age of TikTok. I've seen a couple videos in the true crime community talking about people who killed to get famous on purpose, especially in the context of things like YouTube and TikTok. But a lot of that did happen after 2019, and I do want to remind you this movie got started in the writing process in 2019, so it's very unlikely any real life things like that inspired this, and maybe I'm wrong on that, because I'm sure it happened before that point, but in the way I think about it, with especially the TikTok side of it, that wasn't really a big issue yet, so I don't want to say this was inspired by anything real. That being said, I think it was a very, fun choice. I know it's a little overplayed nowadays, but at the point they filmed this, it probably wasn't. Again, it came out at TIFF in 2023. It's been 2 years since this movie was finished. There is a lot that's changed and happened, and other movies have come out since then. And when I say the Scream element is there, this is what we're talking about. I think it's less Scream 1 and more probably Scream 3 or 4. And I personally cannot stand Scream 4. That being said, I like that element. I like the fact that the drive for them was getting famous. I like the fact that they went with panning it on someone else so that I could be famous for it and not be in jail for it. I enjoy their thought process. I thought they were very fun characters to have play villains, because I feel like a lot of the times you use like nerdier characters for it, and I like that they weren't. Then, talking about those fake out deaths and those off-screen kills, my personal favorite is that first kill after the cold open, because there are 2 kills in the cold open, and then we have our first kill once the counselors are at camp. I love the choice to swap it between the blood splatter on the wall and the chopping wood for the bonfire. I think that was probably the prettiest scene in the whole movie. I would watch it again just to rewatch that scene. I loved it. I don't know which director chose to do that, if that was something they both wanted from the beginning, but whoever's choice that was my favorite part of the movie. I had a lot of fun with that. I was very excited to see an off-screen kill get played with like that, and I was very excited to see where they'd go from there. But that was probably one of my favorite shots. That one, and then there's some really good shots when they're all in the lake a little bit before that. I think the lake was before that. I'm not positive, but I think the cinematography of this movie was very fun and very well edited, and I think that death itself was probably my favorite part. That being said, my actual favorite part of the comedy is when one of the characters is pleading for his life and he offers to be the third of the killers. And then immediately after going, "I could be your third," goes, "I won't touch her. I won't touch her." That's my sense of humor. Like, they talked about having a character that's super insecure about, like, why are you killing the hot people? And then, like, the reveal that the killers are considered hot people, and then, like, "I could be your third, like, that's why you didn't kill me." It's so... I've never considered having a character plead for their life by attempting to be an apprentice to the killers. And maybe I just haven't seen it yet, and it is something that occurs often. That was great. That was my favorite of the, like, comedy aspect of this movie. I had a great time with that. I think there were a couple of scenes that were really, like, silly in, like, a sexual nature without having to be, like, dirty jokes. Like, again, the Spider-Man 2, isn't that movie, like, 2 hours long? And 7 minutes. That was funny. That was funny. I've seen that one all over Letterboxd. You know, sometimes Manic Pixie Dream Boy does get a win. Sometimes he does, and that was his win. I saw one of the deaths very amusing. The character gets stabbed, and their response is "finally." And, like, I feel like that's a trope that's probably used a lot. But I was thinking of Marcus from Twilight. Like, that's all I could think of. And I know Billy Bryk and Finn Wolfhard were not sitting there watching the Twilight saga and said, "That's the one. We need that." But it's so funny to imagine that's what they were doing, that in my heart that's how that happened. Because it makes the movie funnier to me. But that's probably, out of on-screen kills, while it's not my favorite, I do think it's the funniest. Like, I giggled a little bit. I found it very amusing that was the choice they went with. And then, just to bring it all back, I'm almost done yapping at you, but to bring it all back to the characters and how realistic they felt as teenagers, the fact that when their phones are missing and they think their head counselor is the one who not only took their phones, but then started killing them, the fact that their immediate response is, "Okay, we're gonna have real adults here in the morning, we need to look for our phones now, but we will find a way out, and we just need to stick together." That choice that they will be okay and they will find a way to deal with it felt very realistic to me. They had driving goals, they had beliefs that they could get through it, and that made it almost comforting to watch them try to figure things out because they didn't feel hopeless. And the directors have talked about wanting their characters to still have their personality throughout the movie and not sort of rear up into these, like, superheroes at the end, and I think that choice of being like, we just have to stick it out, was perfect for keeping that realism to them. I really enjoyed that choice, and I really enjoyed the way those characters handled Jason. I think that there's no good torture weapons in this kitchen. Some of y'all just don't know how to torture. You could have. all you needed was a rag and some water. You would have been fine. Like, like, respectfully, you didn't need weapons. But that was a great joke, and I get why it was written, but, like, yeah. But to finish this off, I do want to talk about something, and it's gonna seem mean. So let me start by saying I am a Finn Wolfhard fan. I have been since probably 2019. I didn't watch it chapter 1 until the year that the second one came out. And I wasn't that into Stranger Things when it came out. I watched the pilot and turned it off. I have watched most of it now. I don't plan to finish it. But I am a Finn Wolfhard fan. The Turning is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I have his solo album pre-ordered. I'm a fan. And I'm making sure you understand that for me to say I am terrified this movie is going to be treated as Finn Wolfhard and the rest. And I really don't want that. I think that Bryk did a beautiful job, and the fact that as I'm reading interviews and watching them, they hardly ever ask Finn about Billy, but they're asking Billy about Finn in almost every interview is very disheartening. I think the fact that it's being referred to as Finn Wolfhard's movie, and like I've seen people talking about it, and the only talent involved that they tag is Finn Wolfhard, and I understand he is probably the biggest name out of them. Especially to our generation, he's probably the biggest name. But I really hope his fandom doesn't outshine the rest of this movie. Like, I want everyone in it to get their attention and their flowers they deserve, and I'm really scared that that fandom's gonna take over, because I don't like saying I'm part of the fandom, because that seems to come with this connotation that you're part of that. But I remember back in the Calpurnia days, people very much so treated them like Finn Wolfhard and the rest. And when people talked about the Aubreys, it was Finn Wolfhard's band with that other guy. And it's not his fault, it's the fandom's fault, and they need to do better. Because I want the people in this movie to be treated well, and I want this movie to do well. And I'm just very scared that that fandom isn't going to allow that. And so I do hope great things for this movie. I do want this movie to be great, and I know that having him there and having his fandom be the way they are will help this movie do well. I just don't want him to be the only thing people care about, because if this movie does well, in my heart, maybe just one more funding person, one more production company, one more group will look at this and see it did well and take a chance on someone else. And that's my biggest hope for this movie, and maybe that's really unfair to the directors who didn't set out to pioneer anything. They just set out to make a movie. But if this movie does well, I really do think it could help other creatives do well. And I want the creatives that were already in this to get their flowers. I don't want this to be one of those things that get that treatment, and I'm really hopeful it won't be. But that being said, I like this movie. I don't know for sure it's gonna be a chronic rewatch for me the way some other movies are, and if you know me, you know I have a list of like 10 movies I watch on repeat. But I like this movie. It doesn't really matter to anyone. It's also Rizzler approved. Maybe I should put him over here. I'll put him over the Goldfinch, or maybe like right behind me over it, so like when I move you can see him. I don't know if I'm smart enough to do that though, so he might go on the Goldfinch. I'll cover up one of the books that Finn Wolfhard was in the movie of. It'll be funny. But I like this movie. I think it was fun. I think it's worth your time, even if it's just to support young creatives, and the fact that a lot of these actors weren't huge names, even though some of them were already known names. I like that concept. I like the fact that they didn't try to overflow it with big actors, and I enjoyed the comedy in it, and I think it wasn't, I don't think they focused too hard on trying to balance it. I think they just let this movie exist, and it balanced itself, and that's what made it good. But I want this movie to do well, and I want you to watch it and like it, and that's all I've got for you. So thanks for listening to me, baby. You have a good one. Stay safe out there.